When I pulled into Liam's driveway that evening, the first thing I noticed was the silence. His house sat back from the street, a modest one-story place with a porch light that flickered in the rain. I expected noise, voices, maybe the distant sound of a television, but instead, it was still, almost uncomfortably so. When I rang the bell, Liam opened the door quickly, as though he'd been standing right there waiting for me. "Ethan," he said, his lips curving into a smile that didn't quite hide the weariness in his eyes. He stepped back to let me in. "You made it." The moment I crossed the threshold, I realized something unusual: there was no one else inside. No roommates, no family, no stray sound from another room. Just him. "You're alone?" I asked, toeing off my shoes on the mat. "Yeah," Liam admitted, scratching the back of his neck. "It's just me tonight. I thought it might be good to catch up without distractions." The words were casual, but they landed heavier than he probably intended. Something about the emptiness of the house made his presence feel magnified. I followed him into the living room, the soft amber glow of a lamp giving the space a muted warmth. The furniture was simple, lived in, but tidy. A faint trace of cologne lingered in the air, sharper than I remembered from our college days, and it clung to him now as he moved. I sat down on the couch while he disappeared into the kitchen. His voice floated from around the corner. "Beer or coffee?" "Coffee," I answered, needing clarity more than comfort. When he returned, he handed me a steaming mug, his fingers brushing mine for only a second, though the touch seemed to last longer than it should have. He dropped into the armchair across from me, one leg draped casually over the other, but his posture was too deliberate to be careless. His gaze lingered on me with an attentiveness I hadn't noticed before. That we had known each other since college, study sessions in crowded libraries, late-night takeout in dorm rooms, conversations that stretched until dawn. But time had carried us in different directions. I was living with Noah now, steady, dependable Noah, while Liam had drifted between jobs and relationships. He had always seemed untethered, floating from one thing to the next. "How's Noah?" Liam asked, his tone polite but edged with something I couldn't quite identify. "He's good," I replied quickly, maybe too quickly. "Work's been busy, but he's good." Liam nodded, though the silence that followed stretched long enough to feel heavy. He leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees, the lamplight tracing the sharp lines of his face. "It must be nice," he said finally, "having someone who sticks around." I wasn't sure how to respond, so I took a sip of my coffee instead. It was stronger than I liked, but it kept me anchored. That we talked for a while about unimportant things, mutual friends, old stories, little details about work. Yet beneath the words, there was something else, an undercurrent neither of us named. The way his eyes held mine a beat too long. The way the pauses between our sentences felt like invitations rather than endings. At one point, he shifted from the armchair to the couch, closing the space between us. It was natural, almost justified by the excuse of showing me photos on his phone, but once he sat beside me, the room felt smaller. His shoulder brushed mine when he leaned in, and though I could have pulled back, I didn't. "I've been figuring some things out," Liam said quietly, staring at the floor before glancing at me. His voice was softer now, more vulnerable. "It hasn't been easy." I waited, sensing he wanted to say more, but he didn't continue. Instead, he offered a faint smile, as if to dismiss the weight of his words. The rain tapped against the windows, steady and rhythmic, filling the silence that followed. I studied him in profile, the tension in his jaw, the flicker of uncertainty in his expression. There was something raw about him tonight, stripped of the easy confidence he used to carry. "You ever feel like you're living a life that doesn't really belong to you?" he asked suddenly, his eyes still on the glass pane. The question caught me off guard. I thought of Noah, of the routine and stability we shared, of the way my life looked perfectly fine from the outside. But I didn't answer. I couldn't. Instead, I murmured, "Sometimes." That single word seemed to shift something between us. His eyes turned to me, searching, as though the response had given him permission to believe he wasn't alone in his restlessness. That we sat like that for a long moment, the air thick with words unspoken. I felt the pull of his presence, the closeness of his body beside mine, the quiet intensity in his gaze. And yet, in the back of my mind, I heard Noah's voice, steady and familiar, reminding me of where I belonged. That I cleared my throat, desperate to cut through the tension. You should open a window. It's stuffy in here. Liam chuckled, low and amused. You always say that when you're uncomfortable. His observation was sharper than I expected. He had always been able to read me too easily. The night pressed on, but neither of us moved away. Our words became slower, fewer, as if both of us were waiting for something neither dared to name. Every sound seemed amplified, the ticking of the clock, the hiss of the rain, the rhythm of his breathing beside me. By the time I drained the last sip of coffee, my heart was beating faster than it should have been. I placed the mug on the table carefully, avoiding his eyes. But when I finally looked at him, his expression was steady, unreadable, almost daring me to acknowledge what lingered between us that I couldn't. Not yet. I leaned back against the couch, exhaled slowly, and said, "It's been a long time since it was just the two of us." "Yeah," Liam replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "Too long." The words hung in the air, unshaken, refusing to dissolve. That was where the night left us, caught in the gravity of something fragile and unfinished, something I wasn't ready to name but couldn't walk away from either. The storm outside had grown heavier, rain sliding down the windows in streaks that blurred the streetlights into hazy orbs. The living room, lit only by the lamp and the faint glow of the kitchen, felt sealed away from the world. I shifted on the couch, telling myself I should leave soon, but Liam made no move to let the night end. He leaned back, his arm stretched across the backrest behind me, casual in appearance but close enough that the warmth of his body pressed at the edges of my awareness. I tried to focus on the sound of the rain, on anything that would quiet the rhythm of my pulse, but then he spoke. "Ethan," Liam said, his tone careful, as though he'd rehearsed the word before letting it go. "There's something I need to tell you." I glanced at him, searching his expression. His jaw tightened, his fingers drumming lightly against the couch cushion, a nervous rhythm that betrayed his calm facade. "You can tell me anything," I said, though I wasn't sure if I meant it. He exhaled, his shoulders dropping slightly, as if bracing himself. "I've been questioning things about myself." The words hung in the space between us. I stayed silent, letting him find his way through them. "For a long time, I thought I knew who I was," Liam continued, his eyes fixed on the rain-soaked window. "The relationships I had, the way I carried myself, it all felt like I was performing. Like I was playing a part people expected me to play." I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. "And now?" "Now," he said, his gaze shifting toward me, steady and vulnerable at once, "I'm starting to realize that maybe I've been hiding from the truth. That maybe the reason those relationships didn't work out was because I wasn't being honest with myself, or with anyone else." I felt the weight of his words, heavy and delicate at the same time. This was more than casual confession. It was exposure, a stripping back of walls I hadn't realized he carried. He let out a soft laugh, bitter at the edges. "It's scary, you know. To admit that you don't fit the life you've been living. To admit you want something different. Or someone different." The implication lingered in the air, sharper than the storm outside. I tried to steady myself, reminding my mind where I belonged, with Noah, with the life I had built. But Liam's eyes didn't let me escape. "Why me?" I asked before I could stop myself. He didn't hesitate. "Because you've always been the one person I could trust. Even when we lost touch for a while, I knew if I called, you'd answer. You've always made me feel seen, Ethan. Like I didn't have to pretend with you." His honesty disarmed me. I wanted to push back, to create distance, but instead, I felt the couch shrinking between us, the invisible line I'd clung to eroding. "Liam," I began, but the words faltered. I wanted to tell him that this was dangerous, that I had someone waiting at home, someone who loved me without conditions. But what came out instead was softer. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Liam murmured. "Just, be here." The room felt unbearably close. I shifted slightly, but when I did, my hand brushed against his. Neither of us moved away. His fingers lingered near mine, tentative but deliberate, a silent question that my chest tightened, torn between resistance and surrender. I thought of Noah, his loyalty, his steadiness, the comfort of our shared routines. Then I thought of Liam, sitting beside me now, raw and unguarded, offering a piece of himself he had never shown me before. I shouldn't, I whispered, almost to myself. I know, Liam replied. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed the storm inside him. But that doesn't change what's real. The silence that followed was unbearable. My mind screamed for distance, but my body betrayed me. When I turned toward him, his face was closer than I realized, his breath mingling with mine. The moment stretched, fragile and dangerous, and then it broke. His lips touched mine. That it wasn't forceful, not even certain, it was a question, a trembling plea wrapped in warmth. I froze, every instinct telling me to pull away, to stop this before it unraveled into something we couldn't undo. But I didn't move. The kiss deepened slowly, cautiously, like we were both afraid of shattering it. My hands trembled, torn between pushing him back and holding on. The taste of coffee lingered between us, the heat of his closeness burning away the space I had tried to preserve. When the kiss finally broke, I drew back, breathless, guilt crashing into me like the thunder outside. "This can't," I began, my voice hoarse, but the rest of the sentence dissolved before I could finish it. Liam's eyes searched mine, intense but not demanding. "I know you're with Noah," he said quietly. "I know this is complicated. But you can't tell me you didn't feel that too." My heart pounded in my chest, louder than the rain, louder than reason. I wanted to deny it, to insist that this was nothing more than a mistake, but the truth pressed against me too firmly. I had felt it, the pull, the spark, the dangerous comfort of it. That I leaned back into the couch, dragging a hand over my face, trying to collect myself. Liam stayed close, but he didn't press. He waited, patient, as though my silence might give him the answer he already knew. "I don't know what this means," I admitted finally, my voice low. "Neither do I," Liam said. "But I know it's real." The storm outside raged louder, wind rattling the windows. Inside, the air was thick with everything we had just crossed into. My pulse still raced, and the taste of the kiss lingered on my lips, a reminder of the line I had let blur. That I wanted to believe it would end here, that this moment could be tucked away as a reckless slip, forgotten in the safety of the morning. But as Liam's hand settled lightly on mine, not gripping, not forcing, just there, I knew this wasn't something I could so easily erase. That we sat in silence, two men bound by something neither of us had fully named yet, something as fragile as it was consuming. And though my mind screamed at me to leave, my body remained rooted in place, waiting for what came next. The kiss lingered in the room long after it ended, suspended in the air like smoke that refused to clear. I sat back, forcing space between us, though my body ached from the pull I'd just given into. Liam's hand slipped away reluctantly, his expression unreadable but not empty. There was weight in his eyes, a storm that mirrored the rain beating harder against the windows. Neither of us spoke for a while. The silence wasn't comfortable anymore, it was charged, heavy, vibrating with what had just happened. My pulse still thudded in my ears, and every second I stayed felt like a betrayal that deepened. "I should go," I said at last, the words brittle, my voice sounding foreign to me. Liam's lips parted like he wanted to argue, but he caught himself. Instead, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his fingers locked together tightly. "If that's what you need," he said quietly. I hesitated, my body unwilling to rise even as my conscience screamed at me to move. "Liam, you don't have to explain," he interrupted, though his voice was raw, uneven. "I know what this is. I know what it isn't." His restraint only made it harder. There was no anger in his tone, no plea for more, just a quiet acknowledgement of the chaos we had stepped into. It was almost worse than if he had begged me to stay. I dragged in a breath, trying to collect the fragments of myself that had scattered across the space between us. "Noah doesn't deserve this," I admitted, my chest tightening at the sound of his name. Saying it out loud was like a slap, a reminder of the loyalty I had broken. Liam looked at me then, his gaze steady, almost gentle. "You're right. He doesn't." The simplicity of his agreement stunned me. For a moment, I saw the man I had known for years, the friend who had shared late-night study sessions, who had laughed at bad jokes, who had been more of a constant in my life than I'd ever realized. That man hadn't vanished. He was still here, just cloaked now in longing he could no longer hide that I stood slowly, my legs stiff as though they carried more weight than they were built for. Liam rose too, but he kept his distance. He didn't try to reach for me again. The storm outside seemed to ease slightly, though the air was still thick with the damp scent of rain. I slipped my shoes back on, avoiding his eyes, afraid that if I looked too long, I wouldn't have the strength to walk away. At the door, I finally forced myself to meet his gaze. His face was calm, but his eyes betrayed the struggle beneath. "This doesn't go anywhere," I said softly, more to convince myself than him. Liam nodded once. "If that's what you want." But the way he said it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a promise that neither of us would keep. That I stepped out into the night, the cold rain hitting my skin like needles, grounding me in a reality I didn't want to face. My car sat at the curb, and I climbed in, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. The house behind me glowed faintly through the rain, Liam's silhouette barely visible in the doorway before the door clicked shut. The drive home was a blur. Streetlights streaked past in smeared halos, the wipers barely keeping up with the rain. My mind churned with fragments: Liam's confession, his eyes, the kiss that still burned on my lips. Every thought was threaded with guilt, tangled with the image of Noah's face waiting for me. When I finally pulled into the driveway, the lights inside were still on. Noah was awake. My chest tightened as I sat there, staring at the warm glow through the rain-streaked windshield. Home. Safety. Commitment. And yet, I felt like a stranger arriving at a place I no longer fully belonged to. I forced myself out of the car, each step heavier than the last. When I opened the door, Noah was in the kitchen, barefoot, wearing the soft t-shirt he always slept in. He turned at the sound of me, his expression lighting up with the quiet warmth that had always been my anchor. "You're late," he said with a smile, though there was no accusation in his tone. "Just affection. Just trust." "Yeah," I managed, my voice rougher than I wanted. "Liam kept me longer than I thought." Noah nodded, crossing the room to press a kiss against my cheek. The gesture was simple, familiar, and it tore through me like glass. I kissed him back lightly, guilt wrapping tighter around my throat. As he moved back toward the sink, I lingered, staring at him as though he were suddenly fragile, someone I had to protect from the truth I carried on my skin. He didn't notice the hesitation. He didn't notice the storm raging inside me. Later, in bed, Noah drifted to sleep quickly, his breathing steady and calm beside me. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every detail of the night. The sound of Liam's voice, the weight of his confession, the taste of the kiss. And beneath it all, the quiet certainty that something had shifted inside me, something I couldn't undo. I turned to look at Noah, his face peaceful in sleep, and the guilt sharpened into something unbearable. He was everything steady, everything good. And yet, the image of Liam lingered in the dark, a shadow that refused to fade. I closed my eyes, but rest didn't come. The rain had stopped outside, leaving the night unnervingly still. In that silence, I knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a fracture, a story unfinished, a choice I hadn't yet found the strength to make. And as sleep continued to elude me, one thought echoed louder than the rest: Liam's words, soft but undeniable, "I know it's real."